Hello, friends. Mm, good to see you all. Wow. Hmm. Feels like it's been a little while. Hmm. Oh, very nice. Very nice to see you all. Hmm. I wasn't actually planning for a while to start back up yet, but we had a little kind of shift in our plans and schedule, and so came out of retreat a little bit early to kind of manage that. Um, I think those of you who might be, I'm trying to see who's here, might be going to Hollyhock will know Michelle um, is not going to be able to go. Her back has just gotten really bad, and she's been trying to kind of course, do everything she can to rest it and heal it and work with it. And it's good that she's doing that, but she just can't make the trip. Um, so I'm going to be going in her place up to the cold, wet climbs. And so I thought just come in today and say hello and sit with you all. And the good news for you all is that Michelle will be with you for the next 3 weeks or so, um, and you'll get to see her, and she'll be able to lead the Sunday sittings. And I'll be joining Steve and Darine up in Cortez, and they're both traveling right now. They're each making their way up. So can send them metta well wishes for their trips, their journeys. Hopefully it goes smoothly. And just, so grateful to, both of them for holding the space for the last few months and Darine for being there, solidly. And I know that she was doing the morning sittings with a bunch of folks, throughout the month and then tacked on a few extra weeks. And I know that was really wonderful for a lot of people. So really glad that that felt good and was working out, and uh, that her interviews have been going well too. I haven't had a chance to check in with her yet, but it seems like it's been really fruitful. So it's wonderful that that's been happening. And Quinn, thank you for holding the space and taking care of the group. Yeah. And Kelly for helping manage the Zoom during that time. And just thanks to everyone, for continuing to hold the space and tend to this thing together that we're taking care of. Mm. So we'll sit today. I'll offer sort of probably a kind of a short talk, and we'll see beyond that as I get used to presenting myself again. See if I remember how to do all this. And for now, just come into your seated posture, whatever's feeling settled, grounded. Letting your eyes come to close. And just being very careful about forcing anything. Just so quickly the eyes can close, and there's this push, this hardness that can develop in the mind. It's very important to just receive. We don't need to do anything to make all of this experience happen. This flood of seeing and hearing, smelling, tasting. Huge range of experiences in the body. In the mind. Heart. They're all just arising and passing on their own. You don't need to force anything or conjure anything, make anything happen. Just trying to abide with, understand what's unfolding, see it clearly. Be curious. And caring for the experiences themselves. The heart, mind that gets entangled, frustrated, confused. Trying to keep it simple. Receiving sounds. Of whatever intensity, whatever qualities, stream of experience, subtle or gross. Receiving the body. This elemental flowering and decomposition. Experiences simmering, bubbling, twinkling, throbbing, pulsing. Flashing. Streaming, vibrating, humming. Undulating, the breath coming in, rising, passing, like waves. Nothing needs to be done with any of it. Yes, we might make an adjustment sometimes to our posture. Something feels overly uncomfortable. And give ourselves that kindness, permission. But also we can attune sometimes to that letting go, surrendering. to the reality and truth of the body, sounds, coming and going on their own, being born, living, dying, changing, moving. No need to fight it or cling to it. The present moment experience is exceedingly fleeting. There's hardly anything to observe. Each moment, simple. It is what it is. We see it clearly, we see it foggily. We don't see it. We subtly recognize the phenomena, and it's gone. Something else has arisen. Not needing to interview every arising, interrogate it. We see what we see and we let it go. Sometimes the mind is at peace with this flood of fabrications, this quality of equanimity. Other times the instability is scary, frustrating. The heart trembles. And so it uses the tools it knows, familiar with, try to solidify, stabilize. Tools of craving, aversion, of the conjuring of the self. Thinking about me and mine. Planning for the future. Imagining conflict. Imagining satisfaction. Worrying. Remembering. These phenomena can be watched just like the body, like sound. Of course, it's hard to see them. We're so identified with them. Very subtle, relentless at times. And it's okay. You have to appreciate that the mind is doing what it can to feel stable, steady. Try to form something solid around that which is always changing, always disintegrating. So even a moment of self falls apart right away. Needs to be reconjured, recrafted, recreated. Sometimes the mind just stays busy with constructing itself over and over. rehearsing our views, our hopes, our hatred, whatever it might be. We can have sympathy for the heart, mind that feels overwhelmed with the uncontrollability of things. Attune to that compassion, caring for it, understanding, not fighting the content, not arguing with ourselves. The thoughts are never about what they're about. The mind will pick anything. Our work is to see it as a mechanism of stability, of selfhood, not as the enemy. As a result of fear, longing, insecurity, grief, shame, uncertainty. Coming to know the flavors of mind, contractions of the heart, receiving them like a sound, like a sensation in the back, and letting them go, because they too immediately dissipate without substance. Shape. And so there are times where we just recognize what the mind is doing, feel the compassion for it, and let it go. Oh, we don't need that stability right now. We can be with the breath, be with the body, sound, unadulterated, unmanaged, unmanipulated, even for just a few moments. Receiving life as it is. And of course, the heart will tremble again, cling to its self. We begin the process again, caring, seeing, letting it go. I just saw that my microphone sounds like it was maybe kind of low. Does this better? You can hear it better. Sorry. I just wanted to share a story that I learned kind of before this last retreat, and it's had a big impact on me at the time and really through my retreat, and just continues to feel like something very powerful in it. And it's about the um, being mostly known as like an Aztec deity, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. Though, like throughout Mesoamerica, many cultures, the Mayans had their version of this deity, this being, and as well as others. It was like a kind of shared ancient um, God presence. Partly, you can just imagine this idea of a serpent that can be on the land and then also goes underground, but feathered, being that it also can fly, and so it's a unique being, right, that has ease and access through all of the kind of planes of existence, unique in that way. But like many really truly ancient kind of archetypes, there's different expressions of him and stories about him, and this one I had not heard, and it's a story of him actually as a priest, a kind of priest king, sage, kind of ruler in the Toltec times, pre-Aztec, kind of Toltec considered, by the Aztecs to be their sort of cultural forebearers, and um, Quetzalcoatl was a kind of hermit, sage, renunciate, but also leader, of the city. And it's said that he had like a very, magnificent kind of palace temple, but that he rarely ever showed himself. This very specifically kind of designed and oriented for different seasons and different rituals and different practices. And he spent most of his time fasting, meditating, praying, making ritual offerings, to the gods. But he also taught the people, he's considered to be the source, the fountain of like all of their culture. So, weaving and how to work with feathers, and song and dance and ritual and food, and this kind of fountain of beauty, culture, coming out of the kind of quiet, protected cloister, you know. And he was beloved, he was loved, and for his sacrifices, he would find dead butterflies or dead serpents, little dead creatures, and he would burn those, and he would use those as his offering to the gods. And it was a time where what was becoming more popular was and more prevalent was human sacrifice. right? The heart sacrifice. And there was kind of more and more of the that sense of that's the appropriate offering to give the gods. And Quetzalcoatl was opposed to that. He said it's not necessary. He would make small blood offerings with the uh, um, spine of the maguey cactus, but was opposed to human sacrifice. And so, while he was beloved by his people, some of the gods were not so pleased. Some of those gods really liked all those hearts, all that human sacrifice. Especially Tezcatlipoca was another very important, sort of central deity in the Aztec uh, world view. And he was like, we have to, him and his friends got together and they're like, we have to get rid of this Quetzalcoatl guy. We need more hearts. We're just so hungry for more hearts. And so they devised a plan, and Tezcatlipoca went to visit Quetzalcoatl, and you have to, because he was cloistered, he'd go to the gates and to the guards, and he asked to be seen, and Quetzalcoatl said, no, I'm not seeing visitors. And he please, and he said, no, I have a gift for you. Oh, what is this gift? It's like, I'm going to show you your body. I'm going to give you your body. I'm going to give you yourself. He didn't know what it meant, but he was intrigued, So he said, okay, come in. And Tezcatlipoca had a giant, really tall, life size, human size, obsidian mirror. Obsidian was used in all kinds of ways, of course, in the old days, tools and weapons and, ceremonial objects. But you could polish it. You can, incredibly fine, so that it has a reflective quality. It has this reflective quality, and it was commonly used, probably not by commoners, right, but by ceremonially and by the elite, as mirrors in ancient Mesoamerica, South America. And so he brings this incredible mirror to Quetzalcoatl. And he says, look at yourself. Behold yourself. This is offering, for you to see. And Quetzalcoatl looks at himself and he's like horrified. He thinks he's disgusting. He thinks he's ugly. He thinks he's hideous. Of course, Tezcatlipoca means smoking mirror. And so it's not just like any mirror, right? It's not just his physical form, but they're sacred mirrors, this idea of seeing in deep inside yourself, right? Seeing these other aspects. And Quetzalcoatl was filled with shame and doubt, and self-hatred. How could anyone ever look at me? How could anyone ever love me? People must be terrified of me, And he said, don't worry. We'll be back. We'll help you. So Tezcatlipoca left and came back some days later, and he says, we have another gift for you. And Quetzalcoatl is like depressed, and he's alone, and he doesn't want to see them, but finally he lets them in, and they've created this just beautiful jade mask. Jade and gold and all kinds of, quetzal plumes and flamingo plumes and a long cloak and cape and a covering for him. He says, here, try this on. You can wear this. You'll be beautiful. And he puts it on. And he's like, oh, I really am. This is like amazing. And sense of I can be seen this way. I feel okay. I feel better about myself in this way. And they're like, yeah, good. You should. It's wonderful. We'll be back. We'll bring some food. We'll celebrate. So they come back, and this time they just, okay, come on in. They have all this food, and there's like a feast, and it's like, oh, we should, invite more people and have more, friends come, and the servants come, and the doors open, and Tezcatlipoca says, oh, here, try some pulque, right? Fermented cactus beverage, alcoholic. And Quetzalcoatl says, no, I'm fasting. I abstain. I try to live this way, and every day it's like this, these ceremonies and rituals, and they say, no, it's okay. It's just taste it with your finger. You'll see, it's sacred. And he tastes it. He's like, oh, it is good. Just have a cup. Have 2 cups. Have 3 cups. Have 5 cups. And the party gets started. Oh, go invite my sister. Quetzalpetlatl. Feathered mat. The mats were considered the symbol of authority. So feathered mat. His sister also a renunciate. Also a hermit, a cloistered, same priestess. Oh, get her to come over. We'll have a big party. And so the festivities begin, and of a wild night with all kinds of frolicking and undetailed in the codices that remain, which are few. Of course, most of these codices were burned, by the Spaniards and destroyed, but some survived, a couple survived, and so there's a few versions of the story. And then the next day, they exhausted and hungover, and they didn't do their rituals, they didn't do their ceremonies. He didn't live up to his priestly duties. He didn't make his offerings. He didn't make his sacrifice. He fell off his abstaining, off his path of purity, purification. And it just hit him as he woke up, the sense of incredible shame. Although whatever frolicking had happened the night before was not in alignment with what his ideals were and what his commitments were. And it was a deeper shame than he had felt, even earlier. Recognizing that he had been tricked and seduced, by these people and by these forces into reckless behavior, that had taken him down from what he felt like he could live up to in terms of his authority. And so he decided, he said, I cannot stay here. I cannot be the ruler of this place. I need to go make penance. So he had people create a stone box for him. He said he lied in it for 4 days, covered, praying, meditating, reflecting on his actions, perhaps looking for guidance. And so at the end of those 4 days, he got out and he said, okay, I'm departing. And he got all of his goods together and walked, to the east, walked through desert and forest and jungle to the coast. And there he had a canoe built. And in it he put all his regalia and all his possessions and all his sacred objects and cast out, to the east. into the ocean. And it said that in his effort to seek redemption for his behavior, he offered himself in sacrifice. He burned his canoe and all his possessions and himself. And he said that when the fire was going, that the ashes, as they rose into the sky, they became all of the birds of the forest, spread out into the sky. And then as everything else was turning to ashes and burning, just his heart stayed burning and rose up into the sky and became Venus, the morning star, this kind of eternally burning heart of sacrifice of Quetzalcoatl. And I think, I don't know if I fathom sort of all of the layers of it that feel so meaningful and kind of impactful and important for me, but there are a few things I'll mention that I think are important in terms of this path and this practice and this tradition. This question of the mirror and the obsidian mirror, and what is it like to do kind of rites and rituals and all these observations of protocol, and the purity of conduct that we can hold that, has its beauty. But we also see that there's a way that it can be kind of too tight, and it can be limited in terms of its transformational power, right? Just the protocols and the rites and the rituals, the restraint, the fasting, the sacrifice, It's not that there isn't some goodness in that or some possibility in that, but just the consideration of how fragile he was, how susceptible he was to the shadow side of insight, of actually seeing oneself in honest reflection. And that clearly he wasn't ready. He hasn't prepared his mind, his heart for that. He didn't have the tools that I think is something that we are very much doing, right? It's like, in some ways, it's like that obsidian mirror is our practice, and it's a powerful practice. It's a powerful mirror. There's plenty of beauty that we can see, but there are times where we do see these things that we are not pleased with, that we're not proud of, maybe much worse, maybe ashamed of, terrified of. And do we have enough practice, enough tools to be able to bear that and to be mindful of that and to have a relationship with the emotions and to know that we can't trust the doubt in the mind, right? I mean, it's like these classic things of doubt, aversion, self-hatred, classic hindrances that arise for us. And then that slippery slope, it's like when we encounter a doubt attack, when we encounter these karmic knots where we feel like we lose perspective on our practice and our ability to stay steady with something that's disruptive or disturbing, how vulnerable we are to being tricked, into reckless behavior. Whether it's, drugs and alcohol or simply, being mean or whatever it might be. This way that even this, the most pure, the most incredible, beautiful, humble, servant of the gods was still so susceptible and vulnerable to this trick, you know, and these forces that are powerful, right? That make us believe the doubt, and make us believe we need to be beautiful in a certain way, that make us believe we need to these certain things don't matter, and you know we shouldn't be so uptight or whatever it might be. Like these voices. Um, and the tragedy of that, the tragedy of that for Quetzalcoatl, and at the same time, this like this beauty, his ability to recover, this sense of like really recognizing it, really going from a more innocent, beautiful, but maybe naive spiritual life, spiritual practice, to a more mature perspective, right? You can tell that he matured, he got wizened, sober, in this process. And then what is that, let's just say metaphorically, right? To then use that understanding that yes, we make mistakes, yes, we fall from perfection on our path, and we behave in ways that we don't feel are appropriate to how many years we put into this or whatever, and what is the inspiration? It's like a deeper commitment, right? The fuller sacrifice of the heart, the fuller commitment, the deeper letting go, the beauty of that. Right? Not the literal human sacrifice. But we always talk about this in terms of our retreats. It's like this is a fasting of the heart. We don't encourage people to. Sometimes people come on retreat and they want to stop eating, or they're, it's like, oh my God, just eat, take care of yourself. It's hard enough. It's hard what we're doing, It's hard to watch this mirror all the time. Not get shaken, like tremble. And so that was his way of the sense of like, oh, okay, the deepening of that commitment, the purity of that recognition of a deeper path, a deeper truth, a more profound, a more mature surrender to spiritual truths. And of course, this ultimate beauty that comes out of him through that. But I also, I just, and I don't know. We will never probably know that in the codices where, what about his sister? What about Quetzalcoatl? What did she go and do? How did she respond to what must have been a very similar realization? A wild night where she abandoned, her commitments, her protections, her sila, her ethical conduct, perhaps, her restraint, woke up remorseful, shamed. And what did she go and do? And so I have this fantasy, that it's something more like what we're doing, maybe not as dramatic as our own burning hearts being in the morning sky every morning, for the world to be inspired by. Maybe something humbler, maybe something quieter. Maybe she was like, I need to go I can get myself one of these mirrors, and what is this? What is this thing that was like, that just changed everything, that threw everything off course? How might one start to practice with a little mirror, maybe, maybe not full size to start with, and have a relationship with everything we see, the beauty, the light, the darkness, the hard things, the easy things. and that maybe she pursued that path in a way that we are, that's in balance, that maybe doesn't need to be so fixated on ultimate purity and so tightly holding our way that any shaking of it is so disruptive, right? More compassion, more ease, more understanding, more willingness to be shaken, to tremble, to see the fullness of ourselves in body and mind, heart, without having everything fall apart, without it threatening so clearly our sila, our sense of our ability to work with it and be with it and learn from it and deepen our practice, deepen our understanding. So we can think about Quetzalcoatl, we can think about Tezcatlipoca as kind of a Mara figure, in this, and Quetzalpetlatl as our inspiration for moving forward always on our path. Hmm. So I think I'll take a little time for if anyone does have questions about your practice in any way that I might be able to help. You can just raise your little Zoom hand. I can call on you if anyone does have any questions. Hi, Tracy.
Hi. Um, Thank you so much. Both during the guided instructions and then the talk too, this, you said a few times um, the experiences of, or just being with experience and not having the self kind of need to be asserting itself. um, I've just been aware of those experiences, and then the times when, I think you were saying, there's the trembling or the fear and the trying to solidify are happening. And I find having these moments in daily life where I feel like I'm really on the edge, like, wow, I can't handle this like this. I've been a really sensitive system before the practice, and then it's like, wow. But then still able to meet whatever is happening. So it feels like it's hard. I know there's no ground, but there's some way that in those moments, it's like some, there's still awareness and mindfulness and this ability to respond skillfully, but it's hard to, it doesn't feel clear because the distress is bigger or it's more upfront. And I keep wondering, is there some way to, what's a touchstone during those times, or how to reassure myself? I don't know. So that's what's
Mm.
coming. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm. it's such a hard part of the practice is that like those periods where we're just like sort of right on the edge of like there's like total acceptance and ease and insight and like peace with things, and then it's like you're right there, you see this other stuff come back, and we're more sensitive to it because we it's like there's moments where the purity of the open heart feels like so accessible and available, and then it's not. And it usually happens more quickly than we can see. It's like, I mean, not that you don't get a sense of what are the things that might trigger or evocative. And so I think first is to really acknowledge that it is a hard part of the path, and a hard part of the practice is getting a taste of that freedom, and then the reality of, and so there's like this faith in that of like, wow, this is so possible, and that the mind can be that free and has achieved that, right, because of the time and practice we've put in. And so a sense of like how possible it is to be like that all the time. um, and then the reality of just like, oh boy, we're not there, and the pain. And so this sense of like, is it motivating, or is it like just feel like too much, sometimes. So, you know, there's all the stuff around sort of taking care of yourself and the kind of basic, mundane ways that are important. I think the most important thing to me is in like this really understanding that it's like the self and the identification and the fear and all of these things that come up. It's like to really understand that you can't fight them. You can't tell them to stop. You can't just be like, because as soon as you're arguing with them, you're just in it. You're back in samsara. It's just aversion to aversion and whatever, and so wherever we can get this sense of like, oh God, it must be so hard. Like whatever it has been shaken, and it doesn't have to be something major. It can be something very small that we're just sensitive to, right? In that moment, you can't evaluate it based on how legitimate an instability we seem to be responding to. It's like it doesn't matter. The smallest thing can be very evocative, and so it's this sense of like, okay, really respecting that the mind needs to do this. If the equanimity was there, if the mindfulness was there, this wouldn't arise. But the mindfulness isn't there, and the equanimity isn't there, the concentration isn't there, the peace isn't there, the loving kindness isn't there. And so it's like when those things aren't strong, this is what the mind needs to do to concretize, to get solid, to feel safe, even if it's a negative safety, right? A kind of a concreteness that is doubt, or whatever karmic knot stuff. It's like, so there's a sense of like, okay, you don't fight it, you recognize it. It's like, okay, this is what the mind is doing to feel safe. It's so crazy sometimes how it's like this feels safer than whatever other thing we could think of. And so there's a sense of like, where is that place of like appreciating it, recognizing this is what the mind actually feels like it needs right now, and honoring that, right? Honoring the emotion, honoring the fear, the disappointment, the sadness, the grief of things not being the way we want them to be. And hopefully that sense of like settling back into the reality of the emotion rather than the content of the thoughts or the content of all of it. It's like, okay, we just get that this is what the mind sort of feels like it needs to do in order to, be doing this. And then at some point there is the sense of like, okay, can we, within that sort of sense of like not trying to fight it, where do we start to build in structures that might be more supportive? So it's like, where do you excuse yourself from the table and just give yourself a break outside, or really kind of like build in structures and to manage as best we can the sort of moments of more vulnerability that feels like harder to deal with and that we need more like personal space, or we need more connection, or we need more distraction, the sense of like, oh, I actually, there's like too much going on that I can't be mindful of this right now, and I can't kind of get into the sort of like subtlety of it. Is there something, beautiful that you can bring into the moment in terms of art or music or, something joyful? This is like why we teach this, because there's just times where it just feels so overwhelming. So I know it's not like it's just the process of kind of learning to be in this middle ground, of there being like moments of a lot of peace and moments of more distress, and um, to recognize that it's good practice and that it's like incredible. It's incredibly courageous to be willing to do what you're describing, and it's so hard, and it's why it's so rare that people actually do, you know, go as far with it, as you are and as you're trying to and moving forward so it's a when do you take your foot off the gas to just really get, it's like you need to break, and you need to, give yourself time, space, bolster, to just like let the mind concretize, let it get solid, let it get me, and then we deal with like, okay, it would be better if it was like a kinder version of me or whatever, you know what I mean, more generous version of me, and so there's all kinds of things of like, what do we do, how do we protect ourselves and each other from, these karmic knots, and but it's, it's long term practice, it involves a lot of things that don't look like practice always. Yeah, does that feel like it gets at it at
Yes,
all?
thank you, thank you. And
mm,
you were saying it in the sit and then amplifying it again now. Just
mm.
that's so helpful, the reminder of really regard for the protection, because it just helps soften to what is. So thank you so much.
Yeah, totally. I think it's just when you really see what we're up against in terms of like greed, hatred, and delusion, and like, and the audacity of like trying to like get free, it's like, have any of you seen the last year there was a Star Wars show, Andor? Anyway, forever who might have seen it, there's like this guy, he's a rebel, he's like a hustler, and he's just trying to survive, and he's a survivor, and they want to recruit him to be a rebel against the empire. And so it's like, way before the original, Star Wars, like beginning of the, and he's like, you want to fight the empire? It's like, are you crazy? Like, what are you talking about? And luckily, you have that story happen after we've already seen the ones where, like, oh, they beat the Empire. We know that, like, 200 years later or whatever. Hmm. It's not, it's like, Samsara, Mara. It's like, it's so powerful. It's so. And then, we get these tools and we're like, oh, well, we're like, you start to feel like you can do these things and you can get in there and you're like, wow, I'm seeing this. Um, and then there's just like, oh my, what you're in like, it's like you and this dragon, and you're like, oh my god, What have you done? What have you what have you gotten yourself into, you know? Ha ha ha. At least it's just not really a dragon. It's not really the empire. It's just like wanting, aversion, delusion. It won't kill you actually, but it's hard if you're really doing it. So go team. uh, all right. Well, um, take care, everyone. Be well. I'm sure some of you I maybe I'll be seeing in a couple weeks up in uh, Cortez, and others I'll see you a few weeks after that. And so, just a reminder, Michelle will be joining you guys, for the next few Sundays, and that'll be a nice treat. So, enjoy that and be well. And yeah, just look forward to seeing you all again. Take care.